We will write code soon, but not yet. First, we must draw things. We will talk about lo-fi UI sketches and storyboards. This is another one of these simple ideas that once you do it, you begin to wonder, why haven't we always done it this way? So you've probably heard the acronym WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, a sort of tongue-in-cheek acronym that comes from behavior-driven development is WYSBNWYW, which is what I said, but not what I wanted. And this is when you have a conversation with the customer, you discuss what they want to have happen, you build it, and then it turns out that either you misunderstood what they wanted or they described it in a way where they thought they described what they wanted, but what they described was slightly different. And so a really easy way to avoid this problem, especially for the kind of apps we're talking about here, which are interactive applications with usually a screen-based user interface, is to draw a thing with pen and paper or pencil and paper, if that floats your boat, that is a really bare bones schematic drawing of what, let's say, an example screen in the app would look like. So if the user is or the customer is describing, well, I want to be able to create a new movie and I want to have a place where you can fill in the title and the rating, or no, maybe the rating should be a drop-down menu. So as they're describing this, you actually are sketching it out on a whiteboard or something like that. And by the way, why wouldn't you do sort of a nice wireframe mock-up or something like that? As it turns out, and we'll go over this in more detail in a moment, it's especially for non-technical customers, they will often either get hung up on details of the wireframe, like, fonts and colors and things that are not about the interaction. And also some customers, believe it or not, will confuse the wireframe with a partial implementation. And it won't be clear to them that what you're doing is brainstorming what it should look like, not showing them what it actually looks like now. Of course, this is just one screen. And in a real app, typically what you're doing is you're taking actions that will navigate you through workflows that will sort of display multiple screens. And so for that, you use storyboards. You draw like a little sketch of each one of the pages, and you basically tell the user, okay, tell me where on the page you're going to click. So if they're on the Rotten Potatoes homepage and they say, well, what happens if I click on Add New Movie? Then you pull out the other piece of paper and you show, okay, now the screen looks like this. Tell me what you do. And they say, well, I'm going to type in these things in the field, and then I'm going to click the save button. Great. When you click the save button, then the screen looks like this. If you've taken an HCI course and you've heard about Wizard of Oz prototyping or Wizard of Oz testing, this is very similar. You are manually drawing and animating the sequence of events that corresponds to a workflow. And in the HCI community, as well as in BDD, we call those storyboards. So why do we do it in this lo-fi way? Why don't we just do like a mock-up with HTML or even with a drawing program or something? Well, for one thing, everybody understands sketching something with pencil and paper. So again, just like user stories in plain language, it is less intimidating for a non-technical customer. So it's easier to have the discussion with them. It's also quick because you can be at a whiteboard. You can literally be sketching stuff out as you're having the conversation. Also, it turns out customers are more likely to suggest changes while you're doing this sketching than if they think that there's code behind it. So if you show them something that looks like a computing artifact, that looks like a piece of software, even if it's just an HTML prototype, in some sense, there's a resistance on the part of the customer to ask you to change something because they'd be like, oh, you've already written it. Well, that's probably good enough. But if you're sketching on a whiteboard and erasing, it's clear to everybody that nothing has been built yet. And what you're trying to do is get at what it should look like. And similarly, because they can't see things like the colors of different elements or the choices of fonts or anything like that, they can't see typography. They can't nitpick about those things. They can't say, oh, the font should be bigger here, or I don't like this color contrast. It makes them focus on the interaction, which is the behavior part of behavior-driven design. And you can always, change how it looks later with CSS, right? There could be a different phase where the customer can talk about how they want it to look. But in terms of the interaction, this is really a way to, get right down to the details and focus on that. As I've done many times here, I will show you some feedback that comes from students who have taken this class in the past, and in particular who take the project component that is the add-on, CS169L. We always ask them, what are sort of the top 10 things that you learned, positive and negative? And the teams that said that they used lo-fi and storyboards found them really helpful in working with a customer and made it easy to get feedback on an ongoing basis. Some teams found that they implemented something that they thought would be cool, but the customer turned out not to care about it and they had to take it out. Some teams tried to do like a much nicer sort of wireframe or HTML prototype, which took a lot of time. And then the customer said, actually, no, I don't like that at all. So Basically, it's very easy to fall down on this part of the process of getting from what the customer says they want to a shared understanding of what that really means in terms of behaviors, and then from there to development. In some cases, the development part of that, I won't say it's the easiest part because programming is always just plain difficult, but it's not the hardest part. Getting from what the customer says to something that is implementable and testable and deployable, that process is actually where a lot of the fun and the challenge is in doing this kind of work.